Everyday English is way dumber than you think. Behind the words you toss around are dead mice, exploding bikinis, goblins, and yes, testicles. Today, we're tearing open 33 words with origins so ridiculous, you'll never use them with a straight face again. 1. Alright, let's just get this one out of the way immediately. Every time you happily pay a ridiculous amount for avocado toast, you are participating in a linguistic joke centuries in the making. The word comes from the Aztec Nahuatl term, Ahuacatl, which translates directly and unambiguously to testicle. The Aztecs weren't being subtle or poetic. They saw the bumpy fruit often hanging in pairs from the tree and called it exactly what they thought it looked like. This is a level of straightforward, literal naming that our modern, complicated world has sadly lost. So your healthy, delicious, and Instagram-worthy brunch is, etymologically speaking, a plate of mashed testicles on toast. Suddenly, that $15 charge feels not just expensive, but deeply personally offensive. 2. The ancient Romans were clearly spending way too much time at the Colosseum gym because they are responsible for the ridiculous origin of the word muscle. They decided that the way a bicep ripples and contracts under the skin looked exactly like a little mouse, or musculus in Latin, scurrying around. Where we see strength, power, and discipline, they saw a tiny furry pest running from a cat. So that bodybuilder in the corner, grunting as he lifts a weight the size of a small car? In the eyes of history, he's just cultivating a family of terrified rodents in his arms. It's impossible to be intimidated by someone's physique once you realize their massive gains are just a well-developed mouse infestation fueled by protein shakes and questionable supplements. 3. You think of tragedy as the peak of dramatic art, a genre filled with profound loss, Shakespearean heroes, and catastrophic falls from grace. History, however, thinks it's about farm animals. The word's original Greek name, tragoidia, literally means goat song. No, that is not a metaphor for a sad sound. It means goat. Song. Historians still argue about why. Was a goat the grand prize at a theater festival? Did the actors wear goat skins and bleat their lines? The truth is lost, but the dumb fact remains that the entire concept of high art tragedy is named after the noise a goat makes. It completely reframes classic theater. Maybe Oedipus wasn't so upset about his horrible fate, just furious he couldn't hit the high notes in his bleeding, tragic solo. 4. Imagine time traveling back to the 14th century and trying to give someone a compliment. You might tell them they seem like a very nice person, expecting a smile. Instead, you'd get a punch in the face. Back then, nice was a sophisticated, highbrow way of calling someone a complete and utter moron. Derived from the Latin for ignorant, it was a pure, unadulterated insult. The word then went on this bizarre, unpredictable journey over centuries, from ignorant to shy, then to fussy, before finally landing on the lukewarm, inoffensive compliment it is today. It's the single greatest linguistic rebranding campaign in history, managing to turn a word for a fool into something you say about a sweater when you have nothing better to say. 5. The most recognized word on Earth, the universal symbol of agreement, okay, is the result of a dumb, sarcastic typo from the 1830s. A group of trendy young intellectuals in Boston started a fad of using intentionally misspelled abbreviations as a form of inside joke. OK was their abbreviation for all correct, a purposefully stupid spelling of all correct, which was probably met with awkward silence even back then. This throwaway joke, a meme that should have died in a week, was somehow picked up by a presidential campaign, spread by the new technology of the telegraph, and accidentally became the planet's go-to word for yes. So yes, humanity's greatest linguistic achievement, the one word that bridges nearly every culture, is basically an ancient, unfunny dad joke that got way out of hand. 6. One of the world's most popular food items, the sandwich, is named after a man's crippling inability to log off. John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, was basically the world's first hardcore gamer, except his game was cards. He'd sit at the card table for 24-hour marathons, viewing basic human needs like eating a meal with cutlery as an annoying distraction. To solve this, he had his servants bring him meat between two slices of bread, a meal he could eat with one hand while holding his cards in the other. His gambling buddies saw this weird handheld food and started asking for the same as Sandwich. He likely wanted to be remembered for his political career as a statesman, but instead, his entire legacy is being the eternal patron saint of a quick and easy lunch born from pure addiction. 7. The popular origin story for Sabotage is just too cool to be completely true, but it perfectly captures the word's spirit. The tale goes that during the Industrial Revolution, enraged French factory workers would literally throw their wooden shoes, their sabots, into the gears of the massive machinery, grinding the whole operation to a halt with a satisfying crunch. While linguists point to a more boring route related to the clumsy, inefficient work done by people wearing sabots, nobody ever rallied a rebellion by shouting about poor quality work. The visual of literally throwing a shoe in the works is just too powerful and evocative. This is a rare case where the word itself collectively decided its real origin story was lame and adopted a much cooler, more rebellious one. 8. Sometimes history gets a name right, and then we, the people, just decide to get it wrong forever. This is exactly what happened with sideburns. The style was made famous by an American Civil War general named Ambrose Burnside, a man whose facial hair was so legendary, it was practically a separate entity. He rocked a glorious mane that stormed down the sides of his face and connected to his mustache, leaving his chin bare like a pristine landing strip. In his honor, this bold look was logically named Burnsides. But for some reason, over the following decades, the world collectively decided to mix his name up. There was no meeting, no vote. We all just silently agreed to start saying it backward. We're all honoring him by consistently and universally messing up his name. 9. Let's talk about the very pants you might be wearing right now. The word is a sad shortened version of Pantaloons, which were named after Pantalone, a famous character from classic Italian comedy theater, or commedia dell'arte. And Pantalone wasn't the hero or a suave leading man. He was a ridiculous, greedy, foolish old man whose entire purpose on stage was to be humiliated and tricked by the cleverer characters. He was the butt of every single joke. So, the essential garment you wear for a serious job interview, a formal event, or just to look like a functioning adult is fundamentally named after a theatrical clown. Every time you pull on your sensible work slacks, you are unknowingly paying homage to a buffoon. It adds a hidden layer of deep, historical absurdity to every business meeting you've ever been in. 10. After all these words with bizarre, convoluted backstories, we arrive at whisper, which has perhaps the dumbest and most anticlimactic origin of all. It effectively doesn't have one. It's an onomatopoeic word, which is a fancy way of saying it was created for no other reason than it kind of sounds like the action it describes. There was no historical event, no weird translation from an ancient language, no forgotten king with a lisp. Someone, somewhere, a long time ago, made a quiet, breathy sound and decided, yeah, that sounds like whisper. It is the laziest word in the dictionary. It's as if the English language had a committee for naming things, and after a long day of creative work, they got to speaking quietly, threw their hands up and said, I don't know, just make it sound like the thing. 11. The tuxedo, the absolute pinnacle of men's formal wear, a symbol of sophistication, class, and James Bond-level coolness, gets its name from a country club for the super rich. In 1886, a wealthy tobacco heir named Griswold Lorillard decided to show up at the annual autumn ball of the very exclusive Tuxedo Park Club in New York, wearing a bold new style of dinner jacket without the traditional long tails. It was the 19th century equivalent of wearing a pristine, tailored tracksuit to the Oscars. But because he was rich instead of being thrown out, other members copied him. The style became associated with that specific place, and people started calling the jacket a tuxedo. So, the most elegant piece of clothing in a man's wardrobe is named after the rich guy's clubhouse, where it first became a fad. 12. You might want to sit down for this one, because it's a masterclass in tone deafness. The bikini, that iconic two-piece swimsuit, synonymous with summer fun and beach holidays, is named after the Bikini Atoll, the Pacific Island site where the United States conducted no less than 23 atomic bomb tests after World War II. A French designer, Louis Réard, introduced his shockingly skimpy new swimsuit just days after the first nuclear test in 1946. He declared that its social impact would be as explosive as an atomic bomb. There is a very fine line between clever marketing and being a complete maniac, and this man was gleefully tap dancing all over it. So yes, that cute piece of beachwear you buy for vacation is named in honor of a weapon of mass destruction that vaporized an island. 13. The word barbecue has a folk origin story that is so much better and more metal than the real one. We should probably just all agree to make it official. The popular tale claims it comes from the French phrase barbacoa, which literally means from beard to tail. This supposedly described the visceral method of roasting a whole animal on a spit, skewering it from its hairy chin all the way through to its tail. While the real origin is likely a far more sensible word from the Caribbean Taino language, barbacoa, the beard-to-tail story is just too good to die. It's a perfect example of people collectively choosing a story with more fire, gore, and French puns over boring historical accuracy. It gives a whole new, slightly terrifying meaning to asking for the works at a family cookout. 14. The logic behind the naming of the canary bird is a perfect multi-step journey into complete and utter nonsense that folds in on itself like a broken lawn chair. First, you have the Canary Islands. The name for these islands comes from the Latin Insula Canaria, which means island of the dogs, because of the large native dogs the first European explorers reportedly found there. Then, centuries later, different explorers found some cute little yellow birds on these islands. What did they decide to call them? Logically, they named them Canaries after the islands they came from. So, let's recap this madness. The bird is named after the islands, which were named after the dogs. Your sweet little pet songbird is, by a very strange and dumb transitive property, named after a dog. 15. You'd think a modern word like Bluetooth would have a sterile, corporate origin story cooked up in a marketing meeting. You'd be wonderfully, disgustingly wrong. The technology, which famously unites different devices, was named in the 1990s after Harold Bluetooth Gormson, a Viking king praised for uniting the warring tribes of Denmark and Norway. That part is clever. The dumb part is why he was called Bluetooth. It wasn't a cool battle name. It's widely believed he had a single dead or rotting tooth that had turned a dark, bluish-black color. So the high-tech, revolutionary wireless connection that powers your headphones is named in honor of a piece of medieval dental gangrene. Every time you seamlessly pair a device, you are paying a silent tribute to a Viking's spectacularly bad oral hygiene. 16. The word villain is a fascinating and brutal example of pure, unapologetic classism becoming permanently baked into a language. Originally, it had nothing to do with evil plans or menacing laughter. It came from the late Latin Villainous, which simply meant villager or farmhand, someone who worked at a rural villa or farm. The wealthy armored knights and nobles of the era looked down on the poor, dirt-covered peasants working the land and decided that they must be inherently untrustworthy, crude, and morally corrupt simply because they weren't rich. Over time, this aristocratic snobbery became so ingrained that the word for a simple farmer evolved into the official word for a wicked, diabolical antagonist. Being poor and living in a village literally became synonymous with being the bad guy. 17. The word dunce, the ultimate insult for someone who is hopelessly stupid, is actually a tragic piece of intellectual bullying that got way out of hand. It's named after the followers of a brilliant 13th century philosopher and theologian named John Duns Scotus. His ideas on the metaphysics and logic were so incredibly complex, nuanced, and forward-thinking that they were, frankly, too smart for most people to grasp. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, thinkers who favored a new, simpler philosophy began to mock the followers of Scotus, calling them Dunsmen or Dunzes, They used the name as shorthand for anyone who clung to overly complicated, outdated ideas. So, a word that now means idiot was born from making fun of people for trying to understand one of history's greatest minds. It's the ultimate revenge of the intellectually lazy. 18. The completely neutral, everyday word guy, as in that guy over there, has one of the most explosive and treasonous origins imaginable. It comes directly from Guy Fawkes, the infamous terrorist who tried to blow up the entire English Parliament in the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. After his capture, it became a tradition in England to burn effigies of him on the anniversary of the plot. These straw-filled dummies were known as guys. Initially, the term guy was used to refer to any strangely or shabbily dressed person, mocking the appearance of the effigies. But over time, the insult faded, and in America, it somehow morphed into the go-to generic term for any man at all. So, the word we use for a random dude is derived from the effigy of a notorious domestic terrorist. 19. If you call someone a vandal, you're accusing them of pointless, malicious destruction. And you're also perpetuating some very effective ancient Roman propaganda. The word is named after the Vandals, a Germanic tribe that famously sacked Rome in 455 AD. The thing is, while they certainly did their fair share of looting, historical accounts suggest they weren't any more destructive than the dozens of other armies that rampaged through the empire during that chaotic period. Some sources even say their 14-day sack of the city was relatively orderly compared to others. But a few influential Roman writers really didn't like them, and they wrote so effectively about the Vandalic destruction that the tribe's name became forever synonymous with trashing things for no reason. It's a smear campaign so successful it lasted for over 1,500 years. 20. The origin of the word cobalt is a fantastic look into how superstitious, medieval-era miners dealt with disappointment. In the silver mines of Germany, they would often come across this other metallic ore that looked a bit like silver, but was utterly useless to them and often contained toxic arsenic. Frustrated, they needed someone or something to blame. So they decided this worthless metal was being put there by mischievous underground goblins, which in German folklore were called kobolds. These creatures were believed to steal the real silver and leave this fake, troublesome look-alike in its place. So, a valuable element crucial for modern technology is literally named after mythical German mine goblins because some miners got angry that they hadn't found any treasure. 21. The word nightmare sounds pretty straightforward, but its origin is way creepier than just a bad dream. The night part is obvious, but the mare has nothing to do with horses. In Old English and Germanic folklore, a mare, spelled M-A-R-E, was a type of evil female spirit or goblin. This creature was believed to creep into bedrooms at night and sit on a sleeper's chest, crushing them, causing a feeling of paralysis and terrifying visions. So a nightmare wasn't originally the bad dream itself, it was the name of the demon causing it. That feeling of being unable to move or breathe in a bad dream, known today as sleep paralysis, was literally interpreted as being physically assaulted by a goblin. It makes your stress dreams about being late for an exam seem pretty tame in comparison. 22. The word sinister, which today means evil, threatening, or ominous, has a ridiculously simple and unfair origin. It's just the Latin word for left. That's it. In ancient Rome, and in many cultures throughout history, left-handedness was seen as unlucky, unnatural, or just plain wrong. Augurs, who were priests that predicted the future by watching birds, considered birds flying on the left to be a bad omen. This deep-seated cultural bias against the left side was so strong that the very word for left absorbed all these negative connotations and evolved into our modern word for pure evil. It's a brutal reminder that for a huge chunk of history, about 10% of the population was considered inherently evil just for how they were born. 23. Whenever you dismiss something as trivial, you're unknowingly referencing the gossipy street corners of ancient Rome. The word comes from the Latin trivium, which literally means a place where three roads meet. These intersections were natural, high-traffic public squares where people would gather to chat, exchange news, and gossip about their neighbors. Because the conversations happening at these three-road spots were considered common, everyday chit-chat rather than serious intellectual discourse, the word trivialis came to mean anything that was commonplace, unimportant, or insignificant. So, the concept of triviality is named after the kind of small talk you'd make while waiting for the traffic light to change in ancient Rome. 24. The modern concept of hazard, meaning risk, danger, or a potential source of harm, comes to us from a simple game of dice. The word traces back to the Arabic al-zar, which just means the dice. The game, which was a complex predecessor to craps, was brought to Europe by crusaders and became incredibly popular. Because the game was based entirely on the unpredictable roll of the dice, the name itself became synonymous with chance, risk, and uncontrollable luck. The very idea of danger and unpredictability in our lives is linguistically tied to the act of throwing a pair of cubes on a table. It's a sobering thought that our ancestors saw life's greatest dangers as being just as random and arbitrary as a game of chance. 25. The word disaster is the ultimate expression of blaming your problems on something you have absolutely no control over. It comes to us from Italian disastro, which literally means ill-starred. Breaking it down further, dis means bad, and astro means star or planet. So for our ancestors, a disaster wasn't just a terrible event. It was a terrible event caused by the unfavorable alignment of celestial bodies. Got fired from your job? Bad stars. Did your house flood? The planets are clearly in a bad mood. It's the original, most cosmic form of "it's not my fault." While we now use it for everything from earthquakes to a terrible haircut, its origin is a profound and deeply fatalistic shrug at the universe, essentially claiming that your bad luck was written in the stars, and there's nothing you could have possibly done about it. 26. The origin of malaria is a perfect example of humanity being so confidently and spectacularly wrong about something that they name a deadly disease after their wrong idea. For centuries, people living near swamps and marshes noticed a connection between the wetlands and the deadly fever that plagued them. They came to the logical, yet completely incorrect, conclusion that the disease was caused by breathing in the foul-smelling air from the swamps. So, in medieval Italian, they named the illness Malaria, which literally translates to bad air. They were so convinced that the invisible stinky fumes were the killer that they ignored the actual culprit, the mosquitoes breeding in the water, for centuries. The name is a permanent monument to one of the biggest and deadliest medical misdiagnoses in human history. 27. Whiskey. That beloved spirit that fuels everything from quiet contemplation to questionable life choices has an origin that is far more grandiose and poetic than its modern reputation might suggest. The name is a shortened, anglicized version of the Gaelic term Wishy Beatha, pronounced Ishka Baha. This phrase literally translates to water of life. That's not just a catchy marketing slogan. Ancient Irish and Scottish monks, who were the early distillers, genuinely believed the potent spirit was a divine gift, a life-giving elixir that could cure illnesses, preserve youth, and bring warmth and joy. So, the drink you might order as a simple whiskey and Coke was once considered to be on the same level as the fountain of youth. It's a name that carries a lot more divine weight than most people realize on a Saturday night. 28. The word goodbye is the result of centuries of pure linguistic laziness, a slow-motion slurring of a once formal blessing. It began its life as the pious and thoughtful phrase, "God be with ye." It was a genuine, heartfelt farewell, wishing divine protection on someone as they departed. But over time, people got tired of saying the whole thing. "God be with ye" was contracted into shorter forms like "Godbwy." As the centuries rolled on, even that became too much of a mouthful. The phrase was further slurred, smoothed out, and eroded by generations of people in a hurry until it became the simple, two-syllable goodbye we use today. We essentially got so lazy that we turned a beautiful multi-word blessing into a single, barely recognizable grunt of a word. 29. If you've ever felt like your mortgage is a soul-crushing commitment that will follow you to the grave, well, you're etymologically correct. The word comes directly from Old French, combining mort, meaning dead, and gage, meaning pledge. So, a mortgage is literally a death pledge. This grim name has two brilliant interpretations. First, it refers to the idea that the deal dies when you either finally pay off the loan or when you fail to pay and forfeit the property. More ominously, it implies that the pledge will hang over you for so long that you might just die before you're free of it. It is perhaps the most brutally honest and least sugar-coated term in the entire world of finance, and it's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. 30. The tank, the most feared armored fighting vehicle of the 20th century, got its name from an act of ridiculously simple wartime misdirection. During World War I, as the British were secretly developing the first of these land battleships, they needed a way to transport the massive metal prototypes without alerting German spies. To maintain secrecy, they told factory workers and shipped the vehicles in crates labeled as water tanks, intended for the Mesopotamian front. The cover story was that they were mobile water carriers for the troops. The name was so simple and mundane that it worked perfectly. The code name Tank stuck among the soldiers and planners, and by the time the vehicles made their terrifying debut on the battlefield, the name was permanent. One of history's most fearsome weapons is named after basic plumbing equipment. 31. The treadmill you pay a monthly gym fee to suffer on has a truly grim and torturous origin story. Before it was a device for fitness enthusiasts to battle holiday weight gain, it was a literal instrument of punishment for prisoners in Victorian England. In the 19th century, massive, human-powered treadmills were installed in prisons. Inmates were forced to walk on these giant, rotating steps for up to 10 hours a day, a form of grueling hard labor called treading. Their collective miserable effort was used to grind grain or pump water. So the machine that is now a symbol of personal health and discipline was originally invented as a cruel and unusual punishment to break the spirits of convicts. Something to think about the next time your personal trainer tells you to feel the burn. 32. The history of ketchup is a bizarre journey that proves the original version of something can be completely, unrecognizably different from what it becomes. The word we use for that thick, sweet red tomato sauce has its roots in a Chinese word for a fermented fish sauce. This sauce, called ketchup, was a salty, pungent, and very fishy condiment with absolutely zero tomatoes in it. European traders discovered this sauce in Southeast Asia, fell in love with it, and brought the recipe and the name back with them. For centuries, ketchup in the Western world was a thin, dark sauce made from things like mushrooms, walnuts, or oysters. The tomato-based version we know and love today didn't become the standard until the late 19th century. So, the original ketchup would be completely horrifying to a modern French fry. 33. And finally, we have the dollar, the most famous currency on the planet. Its origin story isn't dumb in a simple way. It's a long, continent-spanning, multi-language mess of a journey that's almost too absurd to be real. It all starts in the 1500s in a town in Bohemia called Joachimsthal, which means Joachim's Valley. This town started minting a high-quality silver coin called the Joachimsthaler. As you can imagine, nobody wanted to say that mouthful, so it was quickly shortened to just thaler. This coin was so popular that its name was adopted and adapted across Europe. In Dutch, thaler became daler. When Dutch settlers came to the New World, they brought their dalers with them. English speakers hearing this smoothed out the pronunciation, and daler became dollar. So the mighty United States dollar is named after a shortened nickname for a 16th century silver coin from a valley in what is now the Czech Republic. Turns out English isn't polished and clever. It's a junkyard of accidents, insults, and bizarre backstories. Now tell me this. Which slang or meme today is so brain-meltingly stupid that people in the year 2400 will be saying it with a straight face? Drop your wildest guess below. And if you laughed even once, hit that subscribe and like.